Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Note Closer Show. No, I am not wearing a red halo for those that are watching us here live on Facebook Live. It's just a simple Christmas wreath behind me. But anyway, we're a little bit of the holiday spirit here at the WCN War Room. But we are excited this morning to have a amazing speaker and somebody who I've come to admire quite a bit the last couple months since I got a chance to meet him at the New Media Summit that our buddy Steve Olsher put on that we had on a couple days ago. But we got the man, the myth, the public speaking legend and budding stand-up comedian, our buddy Thom Singer this morning. What's going on, Tom?
Hey, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Hey, glad to have you. Now, most people don't know that you have you've got a couple podcasts. And the one thing that I really love listening to and been binging to is the cool things entrepreneurs do.
Yeah, you know? That's actually my one show. That's all I got.
All right. That's good. I thought oh, no, it's the stand-up that I'm thinking is the second thing that you're doing out there on a regular basis. But you're also out there doing a lot of public speaking. But before we dive into a lot of that, why don't you share a little bit of with our audience who you are, man, and what's so cool about you, man?
My name is Thom Singer. I live in Austin, Texas. So you and I are neighbors. And, of course, we had to go to a conference to meet because you never meet your neighbors. You know, although the conference was in Austin, still, I'd never met you before. I've been working, April will mark 10 years that I have been working as a professional speaker and corporate trainer. So I either go into association conferences or company meetings, whether it's like a team meeting of 10 people to kick off the year, or maybe it's 4,000 people at like a sales kickoff or a big rally for a larger company. And, you know, I try to talk to the crowd about how do you get your people more engaged? We live in a world where everybody's on their phones and are disengaged. And so I have some tips that get people engaged. And I also talk about with teams about how do you work on what is potential and how do you work towards it? So I have a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. You do. It's always funny because I love watching you online. Oh, you're here speaking in St. Louis. Or you're here in a multitude of other places, or you're changing in the parking lot because you spoke this morning and you got to get in your shirt and shorts to come to another meeting.
Yeah, in fact, I've changed in more airport bathrooms because I don't like to travel in a suit. A lot of my peers are like, oh, you travel in a suit, so you look like you're really important and you'll sit next to a CEO and they'll book you as a speaker. Yeah, that never has happened. I've gotten booked by people I've talked to on the plane, but it wasn't because they said nice tie. So I'm a t-shirt and jeans guy. So I usually will run to the airport, and if I have time, I'll dive into the bathroom. And unlike Superman, I just come out in jeans.
That's good stuff out there.
No cape. There's
no cape. Yeah, capes just get caught up in fans and shit. Chance to strangle you there. But you now celebrated how many episodes on Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do?
So I started the podcast a little over 4 years ago. It was September 30th, 2014. And I am now, at the time we recorded this, I think is episode 412 has just come out, something like that. So yeah, so I've been doing it for a while, twice a week, and I'm changing up the format in the new year. Every time I do a solo episode, I get tons of people saying, you need to do more of those. So I'm going to go to one interview a week and one sort of where I'm talking about, you know, potential and trying new things and getting your people engaged.
Good stuff there. Now, what's been the biggest aha moment you've had from those 412 episodes? Anything surprisingly stand out to you that's really helped change the game for you?
Well, for most of the last 10 years, I've done a keynote speech or a workshop that's called Connecting with People in a Gadget Crazy World. So it's all about how do you network and how do you really get to know people better? And what I found is my podcast is the best networking tool I've ever had. I have met more cool people who I've kept in touch with. It's not just an interview. These are people who are my friends, both through interviewing them or maybe being on their shows or meeting them, people like you at the New Media Summit. So the podcast has opened up a lot of doors for me as far as new people I've connected with. And that leads, you know, to business. And so I'm like, why didn't I start this 4 years earlier? We could be at 800 episodes.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree to that. That's a funny thing. Yeah. Podcasting has built some really great relationships in the last 15 months that we've been doing this. We just actually, as of yesterday, we went over 200,000 downloads in our first 15 months, which is pretty exciting for us.
Congratulations. Yeah. I'm ticking on to 1 million downloads and I'm very like, come on.
That's awesome, dude.
Not that it matters. It's just one of those numbers. It's like, I want to have 1 million downloads.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Download guy. And I'm really close. So we'll get there soon.
So you speak about connecting, being networking more in a connected world. What are some tips or advice that you like to give people out there, or is that the secret sauce?
No. I share freely. One of the things is networking gets a really bad name, right? There's a lot of people who, when you say networking, they sort of roll their eyes like, oh God, whatever. And I ask people, well, what don't you like about it? And they go, I don't like schmoozing. I don't like standing around with wine and cheese. And I'm like, that's so funny because neither of those are in the definition of networking. And networking doesn't actually happen at a networking event. The networking event is simply a tool to meet somebody. Now, not everybody you meet are you going to have a love connection with. Not everybody you meet do you want to follow up with. But I always tell people it takes 7 to 10 interactions with people, and those can be in person or digital. I'm pro in person, but I'm not anti-digital. 7 to 10 interactions, not before they're your buddy. 7 to 10 interactions before they even notice you exist. And so you have to keep participating and being out there. And the biggest misnomer is people spend a lot of time trying to figure out what's my elevator pitch. And they're trying to memorize something about themselves. So when they meet Scott, they can be like, oh my God, Scott has a company and they're going to do a year-end meeting. They could hire me. And like I flick a switch in my back and go, well, hello, my name is Thom Singer and I speak to companies just like yours, blah, 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 just verbal vomit all over you. Well, if I did that in an elevator as we rode down 30 floors, when the doors opened, you'd run. So we are teaching people.
You run screaming, right?
I like sound effect shows. That's so cool. Yeah, that's exactly. Do that again. That's exactly what I'm Thom Singer. I've been hearing that all my life. Seriously, though, it's one of those things that we're teaching people to repel others by leading with an elevator pitch. Now, you have to know when to be able to clearly and concisely talk about yourself. But when you meet people, get them to talk, ask questions, and then decide, do I want to follow up with this person? And realize it's not a numbers game. It's not like I met Scott, I met Betty, I met Sally, I met Bob, I met this. It's just finding people who you can create a long-term and mutually beneficial, keyword, mutually beneficial relationship with. And even people who say they don't like networking, they go, oh, I like the long-term mutually beneficial relationship part. Well, that's networking.
That's so the truth. That is so the truth out there. It's not more about just throwing up everybody at a party, but literally going out and building some solid connections. Because I'm always a big proponent that everybody's one connection away from a massive change in their business, whatever that is.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, you have a podcast that's widely listened to. I ask people who I meet who listen to my show, how did you find the show? And almost to a T, everybody says, a friend of mine told me about it, or another podcaster mentioned it. So it's just that one person who says something good about you that leads you to, in case of a podcast, a new listener. In the case of a speaker, a new place to go speak. In the case of somebody who sells real estate, a new buyer. But you gotta be on people's lips. You gotta be on the mouth, or they're not going to talk about you. And if they don't talk about you, you're leaving business behind.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. One of the things that everybody is running into this time of year, it being December, is the Christmas parties or the networking events or the end of year stuff. And they also run into that, especially with the real estate side, come January and February. We were just talking about before we came on about how, hey, we try to stay busy this time of year when everybody likes to take that time off, right? We're booking January, booking February. We got calendars filled. The thing to keep in mind is embrace that stuff, embrace those type of events. Go out there. You don't have to be the schmoozer. If you don't like cheese, don't eat the cheese. that should be a talk. Don't eat the cheese, right?
It'll wind you up, then you can't poop and all that. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But come out and be prepared. Look to build some relationships. Look to build with people. One of the great things I like to recommend to people that are investors or going to the real estate clubs is go up to the president of the club, the person that runs the meeting, who knows who's going to be there, and ask, hey, here's what I'm looking for. Who should I talk to?
Oh, absolutely. Or even better, go up to them and say, hey, I like your meeting. Is there anything I can do to help? Now you got to be prepared. If you ask that question, they might say, yes, as a matter of fact, we need someone to help at the door. But people who volunteer and people who get engaged, that's how you meet people. And you were bringing up sort of the holiday season. People always go like, oh, I got all these holiday parties to go to, whether it's business or even personal. Instead, go in with the excitement that there might be someone there who you can make a connection with. And you don't have to talk to everybody. You don't have to like everybody, but just go in with the thought, when you go into one of these parties, don't go in thinking, who could I meet who I could do business with? Go in thinking, I wonder if I could meet one person who I could help. And if you go in with that attitude, the crazy thing happens. People end up wanting to help you and they don't even know why, because there's so many takers out there who show up going, Scott is here and I will meet him and I will get all the business from him. People can sense that stuff. So Go in trying to say, hey, maybe I could meet somebody. Ask questions. The question I love to ask everybody is, what's your biggest challenge for 2019? And here's the weird part. Usually people tell me their biggest challenge and I'm like, wow, that's a doozy. Good luck with that. I have no idea how to help them. But every now and then somebody says, yeah, well, my biggest challenge is I need to meet Scott Carson. And I'm like, oh, no, I know Scott Carson. I can make that happen. Sometimes they give me like a total softball of what their biggest challenge is. But if I didn't ask, I'd never know. And most of the times I can't help. But when I can, that's awesome. So find out what people need and be of service. And all of a sudden, people are going to line up to help you.
That is such great tips there, Tom. That's totally great tips. So that's the truth. It's my buddy Greg Reed, who's the author of Think and Grow Rich, 3 Feet from Gold. Have you ever had a chance to meet? Have you ever read that book by any chance, Tom?
No, but I know the story. Yeah.
Yeah. He's a big thing. He likes to start at, how can I best serve you? How can I serve you? And that's a great point to make. Hey, how can you help? Yes, sometimes you'll get thrown on the door. Sometimes you'll be in charge of name badges. Sometimes you'll be in charge of refilling the Pinot Grigio or the punch. But hey,
I like a good Pinot Grigio.
I love a good Pinot. I like a good spiked punch too as well. So let's talk a little bit. You're doing some amazing things out there, not just going out and speaking, but for those that are looking to speak more, whether they're starting a podcast, because that's a new trend for some more listeners.
Yeah, or every way, if you breathe air now, you're supposed to start a podcast.
Yeah, right. It's going to be like the subprime mortgage crisis. Can you fog a mirror? We'll give you a mortgage. Can you fog a mirror? We'll give you a podcast. So what are some tips? Because you've been doing this for a while, and I don't think everybody starts off as a natural born speaker. I think you have to kind of develop into it and hone your craft like anything else. What are some advice that you give those that are looking to start a networking event or start speaking more?
Well, so let me start with the speaking side instead of the podcast side, but I've got a couple of good tips for the people who want to start a podcast. And there's some similarities. I had the advantage when I started my podcast that I had been a professional speaker at that time for 6 years, now for 10 years. And so I knew how to use the spoken word, at least to some level. I mean, I'm not the greatest speaker you're ever going to see, but I suck less than most of them. So I knew how to use the spoken word, and that really made a difference. But going back to the speaking side, if you want to speak more, maybe you want to speak just because you want to get in front of real estate clubs, or you want to promote the business that you have. And one of the ways to do that is to be seen as the expert in what you do. So you want to speak at Young Men's Business League and Rotary clubs, or wherever you're going to go. The number one thing to remember is that speaking is usually a learned skill. Now, some people have a natural gift for it, but that can almost be worse because then they get like self-confident and they think that it's okay. So I think, or that they're okay. In fact, there's a lot of people out there who think in their mind, and for good reason, they think, oh, I'm such a good speaker. And I'll say, well, why do you, and I can't figure out why I don't get booked more. And I'll say, well, why do you think you're a good speaker? And they go, every time I speak, people come up to me and say, that was great. And I look at them and I say, okay, so can I give you a little tough love? Some people say no and they flee from me. But the other people are like, yeah. And I go, just because someone tells you your speech was good or great doesn't mean it is. Because think about this for a minute, Scott. You're at a party or you're at a conference, and the speaker who speaks for an hour is just mediocre. They don't suck. People aren't streaming out of the room. But when he or she gets to the point where they say, in conclusion, you're like, thank God. Now you're at the cocktail party 2 hours later, and you're reaching for a piece of shrimp, and somebody else reaches for that same piece of shrimp. And, you laugh when that happens, and you make eye contact, and it's the speaker, and there's nobody else around. What do you say to her or him? Most people say,
great discussion, great speech. Yeah, exactly.
Or some equivalent of that. And that people hear great speech. Oh, great speech. And people think, oh, I'm great because people tell me I'm great. And I had someone recently tell me when I gave that example, they go, well, I'm really honest, Tom, to a T. I would never say that. And I'm like, well, what do you say? Because we live in a polite society. No one's going to go up to the speaker and go, you were borderline sucky as a speaker. That was highly mediocre. I go, what do you say? They go, I'd find the one part that resonated with me. And I would say, I love that story about your sister. And I looked at him, I go, do you know what the speaker hears? Great speech. So people think that they do a great job. And especially if your title is like CEO, employees aren't going to come up and go, oh my God, I was so bummed you were speaking to us today. They go up and they say things like, oh, you're always so inspirational. Thank you for your message. Lots of times they're like, God, let's kill this guy. So just because you hear you're great doesn't mean you are. So what the feedback you want to get, and when you hear this, you did a good job, is the equivalency of what else can you do for me? So if you give a speech, Scott, and somebody comes up and says, Scott, do you do personal coaching? That's what else can you do for me? Scott, do you have a book? Do you have a book I can buy? What else can you do for me? Hey, Scott, that speech you just gave to realtors, would that work for lawyers? Because I work for a law firm, but I think that would be really good for my place. Nobody goes up to a mediocre speaker and says, you'd be great at my association. So it's the equivalent of what else can you do for me? And that can even be, can I take you to coffee for free? You buy your own cup and I'm going to pick your brain. Somebody asking you for free consulting still translates to what else can you do for me? So you got to get out there and speak a lot and see what kind of feedback you get. And when someone says great speech, be polite, say, well, thank you. And then totally discredit it and listen to what else they say. And then if you're not getting what else can you do for me, you got to get better. And the way to get better, the only way to get better is to speak more. And so I tell everybody, go join a Toastmasters club. If you're listening to Scott's podcast and you work in the real estate business, you've never been to a Toastmasters meeting, you are selling yourself short, because a Toastmasters meeting, not one meeting, you got to go for like every week for a year. But if you participate in a Toastmasters club, there's no way at the end of the year you can walk away without having learned something. And if it just makes you a little better, a little more confident, a little bit more engaging, every time you speak, you win. You don't have to become a professional speaker. You'll just win at real estate because you'll learn to communicate better.
Such great tips there, Tom. Amen to that about the Toastmasters thing. Totally agree to that. It's one of the best things that you can do. And the whole idea of the rest of the members that are there to give you constructive criticism, how you can get better on things. There's nothing better than making iron stronger and honing each other's skills, right?
Right.
You a member of one locally here or currently or no?
So I started in Austin 26 years ago. I joined Balcones Toastmasters, which meets at the IHOP up north of the Arboretum on 183. And then a few years later, I moved south and I ended up joining a club called West Austin 2. When the club got too big, like 30 years ago, West Austin decided they'd split into two clubs and they fought over who was going to get the name, and nobody got creative. They just became West Austin and West Austin 2. And I've always, ever since I joined the club, I'm like, really, can't we be like, Bee Cave Toastmasters or something? Because they meet at the IHOP at Bee Cave and Mopac. And the Balcones is Monday mornings at 6:30, 7 o'clock, something like that. And the Thursday morning one that I still belong to. I mean, I'm a professional speaker and I don't go every week, but I still belong to my Toastmasters club because I'm a Texan and Texans dance with the one who brung you.
Yeah.
And I hadn't joined Toastmasters 27 years ago. And in 2002, I entered my club contest and ended up becoming a semifinalist. Came in second in the semifinals. The guy who beat me, 9 people went to the International Championship of Public Speaking that Toastmasters puts on. 20,000 people enter at the club level around the world. I came in as the runner-up at a semifinal to one of the 9 finalists, and he went on to win the whole thing. Wow. So while I tell people I was in the top 18 in the world that year because I was the runner-up to one of the 9 finalists, really, I could have been number 2. Who knows?
Who's splitting hairs there? Nobody, right?
I was probably number 2. I don't know who those other 8 were.
Good stuff out there. Phoebe Mrozek says, hey guys, so excited to see you both. She's moving to Austin in January, so she's excited to hang out with some more Austin podcasters.
Well, come and we'll go have a drink. Since I've never talked to Scott since the New Media Summit in person, we should all go drink.
That's right. Do it in person versus exchanging text messages or Facebook messages.
And what she may not know is Austin actually has a few bars.
Just a few. She's coming from San Francisco. They ain't got nothing on us.
No, there's some nightlife in Austin. We could go have a few drinks and some tacos.
That's right. Tacos for sure. Yefat says, you're in Austin? Me too. Yefat Cohen. So that's awesome. Good stuff there. See, people don't know. Now you're traveling all over the place.
I'm in Austin, but I'm actually on airplanes like 100 days a year.
Yes, same here. Same here. I fly out tomorrow morning to be flight number 36 or 37 for me for the year. So
I did just about 40. I don't have the exact number, but I have 2 more speeches this year, and they're both in Austin. I speak for doing a year-end team meeting for a big accounting firm based here in Austin. So I'm their speaker to kind of motivate them for the new year. And then I'm speaking at a conference on Saturday that happens to be one of the big hotels in Austin. And so my last 2 gigs of the year are both in Austin. That's kind of weird.
Yeah. Doesn't happen that often, huh?
I don't know what to do to go give a speech and go back and see my family afterwards. It's like,
do you maybe need to jump on Southwest fly to Houston and back?
just so I might just go to the airport and just sit there, watch baggage come off the carousel. And whew, okay, now it's been a speaker day.
There you go. You can change into your jeans.
That's exactly right. I could go change in the airport bathroom and then drive home.
Exactly. Now, you've been doing some recent, you've done some in the past, but you've been kind of using a little bit more of some stand-up comedy to help you out with your speaking too, right, Thom?
So I hadn't done it really in the past. So when I was a kid, I wanted to be an actor or a comedian, and I would watch, these people who, would be in movies and stuff like that. And I was like, God, I want to do that. And I never had the guts. I just didn't have the balls to go try stand up or to even move back. I grew up in Los Angeles. That's the worst part. To have a dream to be an actor and never do anything about it when you grew up 18 miles from Hollywood is kind of a loser thing. But I always wanted to, never did it. And last year I was at a conference and there was another speaker there. He speaks on humor in the workplace. His TEDx talk on humor has like over 2 million views. So he's like a legit expert on humor, and he's a friend of mine, and he's also a professional comic. And I was going to be in New York, and I go, oh, let's hang out when I'm in New York. And he goes, great. When are you going to be there? And I told him, and he goes, oh, come to open mic night with me next week or a couple weeks later. And I'm like, awesome. That's when I'm going to be there. Perfect. I go, I would love to watch you work on new material. And the other guy who was with him is like, no, that's not what he's asking you to do. He's asking you to write a 5-minute set and get up at open mic night in Manhattan at a comedy club in Greenwich Village. And I'm like, oh, no. And we got talking about it. And he's like, didn't you tell me part of what you encourage people to do in your speeches is to branch out and try new things? And I didn't have them at the time, but I now have shirts that I sell that say, try new things. And he literally was like, aren't you the try new things guy? And I'm like, God, yes. So I wrote a 5-minute set. He helped me kind of tweak it a little bit the day I got to New York, and my name was drawn, and I got to go up at this club in Greenwich Village, and I did a 5-minute set. Now, there were about 20 comics who spoke that day, or whatever you call it, did a set. I wasn't the best. I wasn't even near the best, but I didn't blow it. And I wasn't at the bottom of the list. And I thought, So then I decided if I could learn a little once, maybe I should really dive in and see what it was all about. So I made a commitment that I was going to do 100 open mic nights. Now, it could take me a couple of years because I'm really busy. I'm not going to do it every night. But I've now done 30 open mic nights in the past 7 months since March. And it has changed me as a speaker. I am much more playful on stage with the audience. I'm a little more confident. I've given 800 professional speeches. But what I learned was 2 things. Comedy is the hardest use of the spoken word by like 10x. So if you think you're a good speaker and you think, oh, I get laughs, I have humor, that's really cool, because I thought that too. I get laughs and I use humor. But if you have to have a punchline every 20, 30 seconds and you have to have cohesiveness for a 3 to 5 minute set, you got to be writing all the time. You got to be trying it all the time. It's all about what comics call stage time. And I have found that it scared the hell out of me the first 10 or 15, 20 times. Now that I've done it 31 times, I know I'm going to bomb half the time. And I just get up and do it anyway. And it's making me stronger as a speaker. But I also think it's kind of changing me as a person. It's kind of making me a little more gutsy.
I love that. That's a really good thing. I've done some open mic nights in the past. I haven't done one in a while, but it's also
with me.
I might have to do that. Yeah. Where are you doing here in Cap City or Moon Tower or where at?
So I've been going to one that's by my house on Monday nights. Now it's outdoors, and this time of year it's getting a little cold. So today we're recording this on a Monday. I'm actually not going tonight. Oh no, today's Tuesday. I didn't go last night. I'm going to go on Thursday this week instead to a bar on 6th Street called the Volstead. It's on East 6th Street, and I'm going to go there and because it's indoors. And but there are 18 open mic nights a week in Austin. I mean, there's a ton of them. So the professional comics who I'm getting to know, and it takes a while. They're not like the most open group of people. Like, oh, new guy, let's hang out with him. Oh, especially because he's twice our age. He's in his 50s. Let's hang out with the old guy. But now that I've been doing it for 7 months and I've been showing up, some of them are nice to me. And the ones who are serious about getting into comedy, they do 10 and 15 open mic nights a week. They'll go from one to the other to the other. I don't want to stay out till 2 a.m. on like a Wednesday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially when you got to jump on a plane and come Thursday.
Well, and I have a kid at home. She has to get up and go to high school at 6:30 in the morning. So I'm going to be awake. It's like, yeah, I'll go and do the early open mic at 8 o'clock and be home by 10.
Yeah, I'm sure she's not the most willing person for you to work your material on either, huh?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Nothing weird. Like I post stuff on Facebook. Now it doesn't match my speaking brand. So I don't post video, but I'll post some stills and her friends will see it and stuff like that. They're like, your dad's a stand-up comic. And she's like, that would be an overstatement. Gotta
love kids. Yeah. Gotta love kids. There's your dad, your speech did suck tonight.
That's exactly right. You were highly mediocre.
You got left off the stage. I'm so embarrassed. But
she did come out. My wife and I brought her to a place, and I haven't gone back because this particular open mic night was kind of a cluster. It was, I didn't like the way it was run. I kind of thought the guy who ran it was arrogant. And anyway, but we did bring her, and we brought her out, and it was like 40 comics. So it went to like 11 o'clock at night, and all the comics, I mean, literally it was a bunch of 22-year-old guys telling dick jokes. And my 16-year-old is sitting there with me and her mom. And later my wife was like, worst parenting moment ever. And my daughter goes, I'm 16. I can handle dirty jokes. She goes, just not sitting next to my mom and dad.
Mm-hmm. So I had a different experience. A couple of years ago, we have a mastermind that meets 3 times a year for our note business. And we had it out in San Diego, and we decided to take it to the American Comedy Club out in San Diego downtown. And they had a comic that we'd seen before here in Austin, other places. Female comic. We're like, great, awesome. And they were like, oh, come on out for a live podcast recording. We're like, what the heck is this podcast recording? We roll out there. It's her and her husband. She's pretty clean. Her husband is the complete total opposite, talking about eating babies and putting kids in blenders. And half of my mastermind's like 65 at that time. All these people getting up, pissed off, walking up. This is the worst thing ever.
You went to a dirty comedy club with the Christian right?
That's basically right. I was sitting there like, oh, I'm so embarrassed. We thought this would be good. Luckily, we didn't have to pay any tickets for it.
The woman next to you made 4 laps around her rosary before the guy set.
Exactly. Well, it's good stuff. Fun things. Now, you've interviewed a lot of great people. What's probably 2 or 3 of the biggest, coolest things you've heard from your guests as we kind of dive back into your podcast a little bit, Thom?
So, the podcast, like I said, it's called Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do. So one of the jokes I have when like new entrepreneurs come and go, I want to be on your show. I'm like, well, when I'm launching my company in like 3 months. And I'm like, oh, that's so funny. It's called Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do, not Cool Things Entrepreneurs Want to Do.
Right.
So, I try to talk to people, even if they're a solopreneur, an author and a speaker, or people who have big companies. I interviewed the CEO of Ghirardelli Chocolate, and coming out in January, I interviewed the founder of FreshBooks. And so some big companies. And I always ask them a lot of questions about how they got into what they're doing, but then also what advice do you have? And then because I speak about potential, I've turned my podcast into a research laboratory, and I ask them, why do some entrepreneurs have potential and never get off the ground and other people soar? And I think there's a whole bunch of answers that come out, but one of the big answers, and I already sort of mentioned this, was try new things. So many entrepreneurs have said, look, I failed my first 4 businesses, or the business I have now has launched new divisions and we've had to shut them down. But if I hadn't tried, you would never get to whatever their service or their product or their new book or whatever. So I got inspired into this whole world of that you do have to shake things up. If you want new results, you have to try new things. So that's been sort of the biggest message that's impacted my life. But there's other stuff. I mean, some of the other advice that comes out is that, you got to learn to monitor your own fear. And they said that, people get stopped because they get scared. And when they get scared, they don't take the risk to try new things, but they also get paralyzed. And, that fear is just part of it. I mean, if you've got 300 employees, and you're worried about making payroll, it doesn't matter if you're scared, you've got to figure out a way to do it. So working through the tough things, like I said, trying new things. And then probably the other one that comes up a lot is the fact that entrepreneurs who are going to succeed have to have a plan. They have to have a goal, because if you're not working towards something, now you may pivot 100 times, you may change that goal, but if you don't have momentum, it's really hard to go from a stop. So you've constantly got to be moving forward. And then if you have to pivot, that's good too, but don't just sit still.
So many entrepreneurs are paralyzed by fear. They're paralyzed by the fact that they may not know exactly, or now I have to get outside their comfort zone and don't know where to go or who to talk to. Right, Thom?
Well, yeah. And that's, I talk to people all the time who go, oh, you have such a glamorous job. I would never get up and speak in front of a group. Well, I didn't start off as like, hey, everybody, I can just talk to you about the stuff that I'm an expert on. I can remember when I was 25 years old, I gave a presentation and I was horrible. Like, have you ever sat in that presentation where you're like, oh my God, this guy is a chump? Well, that was because you were in my presentation 27 years ago. And my boss at the time said to me, you can't be in sales and not be able to speak to a group. And so he pushed me into Toastmasters, and I really thought, this sucks. And then after I did it a few times, I ended up getting good at it. And as I said, I ended up, going far in a contest, and now I make my living doing that way. But it was getting out of the comfort zone and showing up at that Toastmasters meeting. And I remind myself of that all the time. I reminded myself of that when I did stand up for the first time. Or the other day, my daughter is really into boulder climbing. So she goes to a rock gym, and I decided I would go with her, and she taught me how to climb. And she was doing all these ones where she's upside down on the ceiling. And, I'm like, how does one do that? Like Spider-Man. I went up the little yellow ones that were like little ladders of rocks, but I'm scared of heights. And so she had me go up on this one where you end up on top, and she's like, now stand up. And I'm like, ah. And climbing down, they have like a little down chute, was not comfortable for me at all. My heart was pounding, and I was reminded how uncomfortable I am with heights. And then she had me do it again. And I ended up doing it 3 or 4 times. And the 4th time I was like, oh, okay, I can do this. And I remembered that, oh, this is what we have to do with fear. If it's not like death fear, I wasn't going to die even if I fell. It was only 15 feet off the ground. It was like 9 mattresses under me. I probably would have been hurt, but I just had to do it a few times, and I could go back and do it tomorrow without any problem.
Mm-hmm. But that's true. You were not afraid to go try new things. You were not afraid to tell your kids, hey, go do what you want. You can do anything you want, but I'm not going to do it. Right.
Well, I will say that, somebody said, would you go back to the boulder gym? And I said, I don't know, my fingers, like my joints hurt the first day, and like my forearms. And the next day I woke up and my legs from walking on those big mattressy things and chasing her around while she was doing purples and harder ones. And, next day, like my ass and my legs were hurting. And I'm like, maybe I'm just too old. At least I tried.
You're getting the comic body.
That's right. Yeah. No, in fact, I was born with a dad bod.
What questions for our audience out there, guys, that's watching this live on Facebook? What questions do you have, Thom, on speaking or his podcast or anything else? We got quite a few people. We got people from Colorado, Kansas City, Austin, DFW.
Hey, while we're waiting for somebody to ask a question, there was one thing you'd asked about, like somebody who wants to start a podcast.
Yeah.
My advice, if you want to start a podcast, is go in with the long tail thought. So I am just now getting the opportunities 4 years and 400 episodes later. I'm just now getting sort of that big pop. I'm getting more listeners, but I'm getting hired to speak, and I'm getting referred. At least I don't always get the job, but I'm getting referred more often than ever. Because the podcast has legs. When people say, wow, you've been doing it for 4 years and 400 episodes, that's better than I've been doing it for 3 weeks and 7 episodes. So look at the podcast as, I'm going to do this for a long time before I'm going to know if there's value. And then when you think, oh, I don't want to do this anymore, keep doing it for a while. So at least make a commitment to do your show once or twice a week, at least for a year, because I think that most people get into it, and after 7 episodes, they're like, I haven't made $1 million. Sponsors aren't calling me. I only have 100 downloads. I'm going to quit. Well, 100% of the people who quit never pop to that next level.
But that's with anything. That's with whether you're doing a podcast or doing a regular webinar series or any type of marketing. Give it the long tail. Give it some time. I mean, people aren't just going to fall over and like, oh, I hire you, or I'm going to fund your deal, or I'm going to give you assets to buy in our neck of the woods. You got to be consistent about that. And I see people that, oh yeah, I'm going to do a podcast. I'm like, okay, what episode are you on? 10. Okay. How long? I'm in on do it for a year. I'm like, okay. All right.
Or the people who do what I call the occasional podcast, who every time that they're on there, they're like, oh, I know it's been 7 weeks since I've done that, but thanks for being here. Well, it's like, maybe they're different than I am. If I didn't do my podcast regularly, I wouldn't have an audience. And so I think there's people out there who have huger, more religious followings than I do. But if you're not famous and you don't have people who want to hang on everything you do, you have to have consistency. Because if I miss a show, and I've missed a few over the years, I'll hear from not a lot of people, but I'll hear from somebody going, I listened to you on Tuesdays when I drive. Or on Wednesdays, there was no Tuesday show. And it was like, oh, sorry, I was traveling. I didn't get around to it. And they're like, oh, but I listened to you on my Wednesday drive. And so I treated it as, I have a schedule and I have to get it out. And I think I've missed like 12 shows in 4 years.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the thing I always consider, if somebody's going to take the time to tell you, how many people did not take the time to tell you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's only about like 5%, or 1 out of 20 people actually take the time to drop you an email or text message.
Less than that.
Oh, yeah,
Probably
totally.
hear from like 1 in 200 people who listen to my show regularly.
Yeah, that's the truth. But hey, I didn't do one for about a month ago, and people started text messaging. Are you okay? Are you sure you're not sick? They're calling other people. Have you heard from Scott? I haven't seen him any. But that's a good thing. You started to do something good when people start to ask if you're sick all the time.
Right, Scott, are you all right? Should we be worried?
Yeah, that's right. Now, one thing I did, I went on a 3-week hiatus. We took a 3-week European vacation last May and June. And instead of not doing shows for that time frame, I didn't record a lot. I actually turned it over to 8 of my students, and they ran with the show.
Nice.
And it was kind of nice seeing how they evolved over that 3-week period. Initially nervous at the beginning, and then at the end, you get them to shut up.
The worst part was the audience was like, "Oh, Scott is back." Oh,
yeah, exactly. My downloads peaked during that 3-week period.
Scott, when are you going on vacation? I think you need to take.
They've already asked me that. When are you taking another vacation? But so one of the things too, I think coming back to where it's podcasting or speaking, you hit the nail on the head there. Give it some time. Don't look at failure. I think the first webinar I did, I had like 2 people on. I've been doing webinars every week almost for 7 years now, since April 2011. People don't show up. You got to give them time to see it. You said something very importantly, I think in the very first 5 minutes, that you've got to touch base with people, 5 to 7 times before they take you serious. I
think it's 7 to 10 times before they know you exist. I mean, we live in a very noisy world. Everybody's like, hey, look at me, Twitter, look at me, Instagram, look at me, Facebook. And if you don't have some consistency and regularness to whether it's digital or in person, it's easy to forget. I ran into somebody I hadn't seen in 5 years who I'd only met once, but they had seen me speak, and they were like, Tom. I had no idea who they were, and they were offended. And they go, we talked after your speech. And I'm like, well, which of the 800 speeches was that? I mean, I was nicer than that, but it was like, I don't know who they are. And I was sad that they were sad that I didn't remember. But it's like, if we've only met once and we're not corresponding digitally, I mean, I shouldn't have felt bad. I did feel bad because they felt bad, but
that same thing happened to me yesterday morning. I had to call somebody up in Minnesota, and I'm looking at their profile. I was like, have I met this guy before? They have no posts on LinkedIn, which I spent a lot of time on, no posts on Facebook, except a picture of their family. I'm like, I think I've met this guy before. So I called up, I'm talking on the phone, because I don't know if we've met before. Oh yeah, we've met and talked a couple times. I'm like, okay, I don't remember you.
Well, I don't get a lot of gigs from things where I haven't had contact with people. It's just they've saw me on social media. But I recently was the master of ceremonies for a 3-day event, and when we had our initial call and they got the CEO on the phone, I'm like, so how did you guys find me? And he goes, you have a good reputation, but I've been following you on social media for a long time. And he goes, the fact that you work a lot gives me peace of mind to hire you. And I'm like, well, there you go. There's my one Instagram, Twitter client. But he said, you post and you're out there, and he goes, and you're always very pro meetings, business, and pro associations. And he goes, so I've always liked that, and I've always followed you. But we'd never met. He didn't know me, but he saw the little drip of that I played in his field, and then he hired me. And I mean, I wish that happened every day, but it does happen.
It does happen. One of the big things that we like to tell people is you never know who's watching or following you. And sometimes it takes people 3 months or 6 months or even longer to find the courage to reach out or find something that they have a reason to reach out to you, but you want to be fresh in their minds when they do.
And that's why I love to go on shows like your podcast. I love to go on shows because people who listen to podcasts are more apt to listen to another podcast. Yep. And so, I love to have podcasters on my show. I love to go on their show because you never know when that one person's going to be like, oh, I'll check this out. And then they tell 2 friends and so on and so on and so on, like the old hair commercial.
Exactly. You're the hairdresser, the pod dresser. Tom, what's a big goal you've got set for 2019 for you?
So 2017 was my record year. I'd grown the business every year, year after year after year. 2017 was just the delightful number I've wanted to make. And, family was able to take more vacations and la-da-da-da-da. And I kind of fell on my little, aren't I cool? I know that probably doesn't happen in your industry.
All the time it happens in our industry. Yes, it does. Yeah.
So 2018, while it wasn't a bad year, I mean, if I was to, nobody's business to share my numbers, but if I was to share numbers, people go, oh, you did good. but it wasn't as good as 2017. So part of what I'm trying to do is regroup in my mind and get over myself and act like I did 10 years ago when I first started speaking, and maybe act like I did 4 years ago when I first started the podcast, and be a little more humbly and be a little more hungry. And so my goal is to have a record year numbers wise, financially. But at the same time, for next year, I really just want to be at peace with the fact that I'm really, really fortunate. This will be April 1st will mark 10 years that I've been working full time as my only income is as a speaker. What was that?
That's an applause.
That was
That's
applause
meter.
It sounded like somebody throwing up.
Yeah, I held it too close to the mic.
Yeah.
10 years. That's awesome.
The 10 years that my whole income has been from being a speaker and a trainer and a master of ceremonies. And, I make a little bit of money. I do a little bit of coaching. Sometimes people want to become a speaker and they come to me and they go, "Oh, can you help me?" And for years I said no. But now what I'm doing is I have a set of criteria. And so I only help people who really meet the criteria. They have to have been, and I call it a professional level speech. It doesn't mean they have to have been paid, because the speaking business isn't just about being paid. Sometimes you speak and you pick up clients. Well, you might make more money than I did from the client you picked up. So, but they've had to have given 25, what I call professional level speeches, because I want to make sure that you don't get asked to do 25 of them unless you have something going on for you, or they have they have to prove to me that they are a kick-ass expert in whatever their topic is. So I only work with a handful of people that pulls out most people who say, "Hey, will you work with me?" And then, I'll coach them on the sense of what I've learned from the business. I don't make $1 million a year. So, if you want to go get coached by Tony Robbins, do it, right? He makes millions and millions of dollars a year, but he also charges more for that coaching than I do. So there's a little bit of a trade-off, but I want to help people avoid a lot of the pitfalls that exist. Because here's the thing about the speaking industry. People think it's the speaking industry. It's really 10 or 12 different business models. Like Colin Powell isn't my competitor, and yet he makes most of his income as a professional speaker. But nobody sits around going, should we have the former Secretary of State speak at this conference, or should we have Thom Singer? It just doesn't come up, right? He gets $40,000 or $50,000 for 45 minutes. He flies in, he speaks. I get paid a lot less, and I usually stay for a couple of days. It's a different business model, and I don't run head to head. One time, this is a funny story. One time, Scott, an association was looking at me, and the CEO really liked me, and he kept pushing for me. So they started with like 10 people. They narrowed it down to 2. Now, their budget was bigger than me, but the CEO was kind of pushing for me. And they narrowed it down to me and Biz Stone. And then they were having these interviews, and like they back-to-back interviewed us on the phone. And then the committee sat and talked about it. Biz Stone is one of the founders of Twitter. Mm-hmm. They ended up picking Biz Stone. Now, he cost $25,000. And I think at the time I was like 10. And the lady said that she thought I was going to be better, more relevant, but the committee wanted somebody famous, and they had the money for it. And I was like, I've never looked at that I lost that deal. It never should have been. If they had that budget and the committee wanted fame, he and I were in different business models. And so I've always looked at that you have to realize, what am I speaking for? What's my ideal client? What's my purpose? And then figure out what slice of the pie you're going after. And then, I have some ideas on how you can jump in and do it.
Do you have any advice for those looking for more speaking opportunities, things that they should focus on, maybe things that you started doing when you were first kicking things off, or evolved over the last couple of years?
Yeah. I mean, if you're just starting off, you have to decide, am I doing this to promote my business? Am I doing this to become a professional speaker? Know your purpose, but then go speak. Speakers speak. They asked Stephen King one time, somebody came up to him and said, I want to be a writer. And Stephen King said, well, what do you write? And the man or the woman said, well, I don't. I want to be. And he goes, no. Writers don't think, writers write. It's inside of you. You have to sit down and write. If you want to be a writer, that means you should be sitting down writing something. They're like, I don't think it would be that good. And he goes, it doesn't matter if it's published. It doesn't matter if you share it. Writers write from their soul. And I think I've stolen that. And I say, speakers speak. If you want to be a speaker, you go speak. I'll be fully transparent with you. Remember that $9 billion lottery? I didn't win it, but if I had won it, I would still speak. I mean, this year I'll speak over 75 times between some small local stuff and some big national stuff. And I always tell people that's not 70 different clients. If I'm at a conference, I can do the keynote and 2 breakouts. That's one fee, but I'm speaking to 3 different I'm doing 2 different speeches. So I'll do over 75 talks throughout the year and have for years. And some of those, when I started off, were Young Men's Business League, Rotary Clubs, Association for Corporate Growth, people who didn't pay me. And even now, sometimes I'll do that because I can try new material at a free thing. But if I won the $9 billion, I would still speak 50 to 100 times a year. I would just do it for free because it wouldn't matter. I would just tell people, I want to come speak your high school. I want to come do this. I'll donate to you if you let me speak. I find ways to say yes to speaking. And I think I will do that my whole life, even if financially it didn't matter anymore.
I love that. Yeah, I think when you do something you love, it doesn't become work. It becomes being able to get paid at something you enjoy. And it's something that you end up doing no matter what it is, right?
And I do like it. And part of it, let's face it, I wanted to be an actor or a comedian as a kid. Part of it, there's a little bit of ego. You want to be up on stage. And sometimes speakers say, oh, I have no ego. It's all about serving the audience. And I typically say, bullshit. Very few people say, oh, put me on stage, unless they want to be up there to teach and to share. And part of it is you feel you have something to share. But beyond the fact of wanting to be on stage, I really do like when I can have an impact in a positive way, whether it's entertaining, whether it's life-changing ideas or something they can put into practice for their business. So it's that combination of, yeah, I like the skill. I like to flex that muscle of being on stage and being good at it. But I also love the fact when people come up and say, I took your advice and here's what happened. There's nothing like that in the world.
That is so good. That's good stuff there. Tom, what's the best way for people to reach out and get a hold of you?
Smoke signals. Yeah.
There you go. Good stuff.
Paper airplanes off of really high buildings, and getting like a whole bunch of people to spell the message out in a field and then have a drone take a picture of it as you're laid out in the shape of letters. Or
there's a stand-up comedy right there, buddy.
Or you can go to thomsinger.com. That's THOMSINGER.com. And there you'll find my speaking stuff, my books, my podcast, pictures of me standing there like a speaker going.
Everybody points. What is it about everybody pointing?
Yeah, it's the pointing like, hey.
Hey. Well, hey, Tom, thank you so much for taking time on your schedule to join us here this morning. Once again, everybody, thomsinger.com, THOMSINGR.com, or check him out on Cool Things Entrepreneur with Thom Singer, the podcast. You will love it and get some great nuggets. And obviously, stay laughing. There's a lot of good comedy on there as well. Tom, once again, thanks so much, buddy. Happy holidays to you and your family. All right.
Yeah.
We'll do, bud. We'll get together. Definitely. We got to get the Austin podcasters to meet at some other time than a Saturday morning when I'm on the road.
Oh yeah. That group does meet like at a coffee shop in way north. Well, you're way north. You're probably like, oh, Anderson Lane. That's awesome.
That's
I have to pack water to go north of the river.
Amen to that. Exactly. We start boiling water again. We'll see you later, Tom. Thanks so much, bud. Bye. All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Note Close Show. Like I said, check out thomsinger.com or Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do. You will not be disappointed. Make sure to like it, subscribe it, and add it to your regular playlist. Otherwise, guys, go out, take some action, do some new thing, do something new.
Try new things.
Yeah. Try new things. Exactly.
Buy a shirt.
Yeah. Buy a shirt at thomsinger.com.
Try new things. Shop. That's a thing.
What was that again?
Try new things. Shop.
Try new things. Shop. I like that. I'm going to look for that. Good stuff, man. We'll see you later.